Howdy. So I think I'm initially skeptical of McBrayer's claim that our special obligations towards our spouses arise because of promise making. I don't I don't quite think that's right. And here's why. Think about other relationships we enjoy and stand in. Think about parent-child relationships and friendships. When I sign on to being a father or when I become a father, it seems like I acquire all sorts of really rich responsibilities towards my child. And I continue to have those responsibilities even as my child gets older and becomes an adult and so on. But it doesn't seem like I at any point I didn't really need to make promises in order for those obligations to arise. Now maybe I could maybe say to my child, "Hey, I promise to be a good dad to you. I promise to protect and provide and care for you." But I would have the obligation to protect, provide, and care for my child, even if I never made those promises. So the promise making kind of seems superfluous to the reality of the obligations that I have. I think a similar thing is true in the case of friendship. Suppose I have a really great friendship, it's really deep, and as with the parent-child relationship, I have all sorts of responsibilities and obligations towards my friend. But at no point did I, need to make any sort of rich or elaborate promises to them in order for those obligations to arise. Again, the promise making could happen, but it just kind of seems superfluous. Like the obligations are going to be there whether I make promises or not to my friend. If all of that's true in the case of parent-child relationships and in the case of friendship, why isn't that also true in the case of marriage? Maybe you think there's a, substantive difference between parent-child relationships and marriage. But friendship at least seems closer to marriage than a lot of other relationships. I mean, I kind of think that marriage is a type of friendship. It's a special kind of friendship. But again, if promise making isn't really what explains the rich responsibilities we have towards our friends, why would promise making be needed to explain the rich responsibilities we have towards our spouses? To just press that line of thinking a bit further, just imagine that I approach my child one day when they're a bit older and I just say, "Hey, look, I I promise to be a great father to you, to protect, provide, and care for you. But I kind of want to write in an exception here. I want to throw in some qualifications. And one of them is that I'm going to do all of that unless you're rebellious. It's in those rebellious seasons where I'm not promising to show up and protect and provide in those seasons, okay? And just stipulate that your child's like, fine, okay. They sign up for that. It just seems like it doesn't matter. Like if I don't show up in my child's life, even when they're rebelling, I'm failing them morally speaking. I'm doing something morally questionable. Issuing a promise that has that qualification seems irrelevant. It's like screened off. It's superfluous. And I think a similar thing holds in friendship. I might come to my friend and be like, "Hey, I just want to promise some things to you as my friend. But here's one thing I'm not promising. I'm not promising to be there for you if like you really get on my nerves. That's when I'm going to maybe not be so present and involved." And then the day comes where they get on my nerves and then I'm not present. They're like, "Hey, I feel like you're not being present for me." And I'm like, "Hey, I never promised to be present for you when you were getting on my nerves and you're getting on my nerves." And just that qualification aside, it doesn't matter. Like I'm being a bad friend and I'm actually doing something morally questionable intuitively. I should be present for my close friend even when they're getting on my nerves. And having a promise with that qualification makes no difference to that obligation. If all of that's true in the case of marriage or of parent-child relationships and in the case of friendships, why isn't it also true in the case of marriage? Just seems like I think this is my view, is that to enter into these relationships is to take on a set of responsibilities and obligations that come with the relationship. You don't get to decide on them. You don't get to create and construct promises that determine what your obligations are. No, if you're going to be a parent, if you're going to be a great friend, if you're going to be married, you're agreeing to a set of responsibilities that are inherent to the relationship itself. The promise making just doesn't seem relevant here. So if all of that's true, then it might have some really interesting ramifications for the permissibility of divorce. McBrayer makes it sound like, when you're about to get married, you need to be very careful about what you're promising. Talk with your partner about what you're signing up for. But if what I'm suggesting is right, like that might be irrelevant. Making all these qualifications in your promises, having all these provisos might just be entirely superfluous, make no difference, because to sign up for marriage is just to sign up for a set of inherent responsibilities that come along with marriage itself. All right, enough said.